So everybody, I got Takis Extreme Heat Nacho Chips. Phil, these are supposed to be some of the spiciest nacho chips in the world. What do you think?
I've not had them before, and both of these, this is Fuego. I think that's that may be just their baseline Takis. And then this is Blue Heat. They both say extreme. So it kind of scares me a little bit. Now, these have been around for a long time. Now, a lot of you watching about Takis, why are you doing Takis? We've never had them. In fact, they were released in 2004 in the US. They'd been around before that, but now they came in the US in 2004. That's when you and I graduated high school. It's a long time ago. We don't like to think about it, but we want to contextualize this. You know, this is around the time you and I, you know, what else was going on around the time? Blink-182.
Yeah.
This is a real natural transition to our other topic. Blink-182 has a new album out.
Exactly.
One more time. I got it right. Now, we're going to try these, and we're going to talk about this album.
Yeah.
How's that sound?
I got some things to say because I got a feeling this is going to do something to me that some of these Blink-182 reviews have done, and they triggered me.
Let's put this one down for a second. We're going to start with the basic Fuego.
Okay.
So, smell it. Go ahead and get a smell.
Okay, it doesn't smell hot.
Okay. Now, where are you at on Blink-182 in general?
Okay, so obviously being a kid, millennial, one of my favorite bands, you know, of all time.
Afraid to start eating this till
To say that I would go as far to say that they were one of the bands that defined their generation.
Woo!
I'm pretty good.
Heat.
Kind of reminds me of those hot fries or whatever. What are those things called?
Handicap pot fries.
Yep.
Pop punk was pretty big when we were younger. It's kind of had a resurgence a little bit.
It did. Machine Gun Kelly had his pop punk album, which was the #1 album of that year, which is like what 2022 when that came out.
No.
Or 2021. Either way, Travis Barker helped with that album. All Time Low, which was the band that was big in the early 2000s, they had a resurgence too with their Monsters single because they ended up redoing that and making a cut with Demi Lovato and Black Bear. So these aren't that hot because I'm able to kind of remember all this stuff.
That's good. I mean,
they are
tingling
good.
on my throat, but
anyways, so Blink-182 was one of the biggest pop punk bands. Some would say, even go as far to say they helped create the genre.
Yeah.
I definitely say that Blink-182, Green Day, and Good Charlotte were, and Avril Lavigne helped. Like,
it is a funny thing to say.
It's a funny thing to say that all together, but
Now, obviously, I'd argue Avril Lavigne came later, but you're right in that they.
I don't know. I was in 8th grade whenever 8th or 9th grade when Skater Boy came out.
So I'm picturing Green Day and Blink's earliest albums were what?
In the early 90s. But think about when it hit mainstream. Blink-182 didn't hit mainstream until Enema of the State, and then Green Day, like what? Dookie?
Because even as popular as Dude Rest, like Damn It was,
right.
It wasn't like a huge. I'm gonna maybe take some wild.
It wasn't a household
here.
song.
Yes. Yeah.
Like What's My Age Again was a household song.
Yes.
Everybody knew it. Everybody knew the video.
That was the first time now up front, I would say Blink-182 is my favorite band. I think this has always been difficult for me to say, is because it sounds weird for a lot of people when we were growing up saying like, oh, Blink-182 is my favorite band, because they'd always had that, the idea around it, they were always immature, and it wasn't like musically, technically like complicated in any way. It was pop punk. It was, simplified melodies and all this stuff and musicianship. I didn't care. I liked the way that sounded. And so I'd always like, I always hesitate a little bit. It's like, can I just say they're my favorite band, or am I going to get like made fun of for saying a pop punk band is my favorite band?
Right.
Now I don't care. I mean, you just age out of that stuff. But at the time, it always felt a little weird. But yeah, so they are my favorite band. And I'm not going to pretend to know everything. That's also another thing whenever I talk about like a favorite band or something. I don't know everything about every history of everything. I don't know why every song was written. I don't know all the history, like what bands the other bands they were in before all this stuff. So I still have to look up like the name of the original drummer. I'm pretty sure it's like Scott Rainer or something like that. And now people say, "Oh, how's it your favorite band?" You can't tell me everything about it. It's kind of like those name 5 song guys. Like,
sometimes it's best for you not to know everything, and you don't want to ruin it. You want to go with what you know and why they're your favorite, and then leave it like that.
Which gets into this. So, Blink-182, they had I forgot how they worded their breakup. It wasn't a breakup back after the self-titled album. I love the self-titled album that came out in 2003.
Yeah,
probably my favorite.
That's one with Feeling It in it, right?
Yep,
that's one of my favorite Blink-182 songs of all time.
Because to me, that was the perfect. It was the combination of them maturing, experimenting. They got better instrument-wise. I think lyrically, things were better, and it was just this cool mix of everything. And I know purists didn't really get into that. They love like just simplified early Blink.
Right.
I'm sure they'd probably complain when they got popular, even after Enema of the State.
They always do.
And so, anyway, that was like the perfect sweet spot. So let's take a look at this. So this album came out. Edging was the first one. Don't really love Edging.
Let's do some Blue Heat while you're doing that. So you didn't really like Edging.
And then the other one that came out was One More Time.
Wow, this actually looks really cool.
That one was already kind of spicy. So
real nice and
I do like the color though.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I picture a Blue Heat. I picture
this has a more of a corn taste to it.
No one doesn't hit unless it's going to come later.
Or kind of like either like a corn or like a rice cake type of.
Getting some blue on me.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and say these things are amazing.
They don't have the immediate tang as the Fuego ones. I'm surprised. I figured that was going to be way more extreme.
Both of them I really like. The Fuego and the Blue Heat. Highly recommend. They would go really well with that pepper soda that we had in a previous episode. So check that out somewhere around here.
Now, next they put out around the same time, One More Time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one is obviously lyrically very lore, nostalgic. It's about them. A lot of this is about them, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of on the nose, obviously, but I said it was okay, and I remember saying this when I listened to it. I was like, I feel like it's missing something, a breakdown or something. And then I found out that Tom specifically considered adding a more guitar, maybe a breakdown, a solo, something like that, but he decided against it. And I'm like, man, I would have liked to heard that, because it's not a bad song, but it's also just like nothing happens. And I picture some of the previous albums having similar songs, like Letters to God or something from Boxcar Racer, which is a similar sort of just straightforward sort of acoustic or slow song, and then it really takes off towards the end. But anyway, whatever. It's really those two were popular, I think, for the most part, amongst fans.
Oh yeah.
Now, generally speaking, I think the album is sort of about hitting. It looks like around C pluses and Bs critically, like sevens across the board, maybe some low fives, or I guess 5's not low, but I guess in the grand scheme of things,
5.3. I mean, it's a 50% on a 10 scale.
Yeah. Now, I made sure not to read anything about any of it before. I had to listen to a podcast that they talked about, the people talked about it, and they weren't hot on it, but they also weren't big fans of Blink.
Right.
And I remember that's what I thought about. I was like, because they're complaining about things like they felt it was a cynical cash grab, sort of trying to recapture this, like, because they got the tour coming up.
Right.
So it's just put it out there to sell the tour. Mm-hmm. I don't really get that from the album. I don't get any kind of cynicism or anything. I felt to me it feels like a natural extension from the self-titled album. Mm-hmm. A little bit of Neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. It's got a combination of Angels and Airwave sounds. There's one song that is it's Terrified, which is specifically sounds like Boxcar Racer, and for a good reason, because they said it was a previous Boxcar Racer song. Right. And so, that's leading it. That's how we got to this album. They got back together, and they got a tour coming up. In fact, we are going to go see them.
I know. Year. Whoop, whoop.
Yep, I'm kind of surprised that I hadn't seen them at this point. I had a chance back in 2011. I think we may have talked about it a long time ago, but we didn't really. There was no plan set. So
right.
So yeah, let's get into more detail now. Do you have any standout songs that you like? I got the track list here. I can go through.
So More Than You Know is probably is one of my favorites on there, if not the favorite.
Yeah.
I do like the Anthem Part 3. I thought that was kind of a cool song to start out with.
I've liked every anthem they've released. Anthem
Yep.
2 was on. Anthem 1 was that on Intimate State, maybe. Anthem 2 was on Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. And then now we got Anthem 3. So that's our Anthem 3 starts the album. It's a good kickoff.
Yep.
Dance With Me, I like.
I like that one too.
It's a pretty solid. It's hard to explain, but it does sound. It's a very number 2 song. If I'm listening back to previous albums, I'm like, yeah, I don't know what it is about this. It's a very number 2 spot song.
Right.
Can't explain it.
Yeah. Yes, hearing what the critics say, I say, yeah, after hearing Anthem Part 3, I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, cash grab, whatever. Because that sounds very close to Blink. But to me, you listen to the songs like Dance With Me, Terrified.
Fell in Love. That's got the...
Yep, Fell in Love, Blink Wave, and Turpentine.
Yeah.
And to me, that shows that this wasn't a cash grab, that this was them taking basically all of their years of playing with each other and various side projects and being like, you know what, like let's make all this work.
Yeah.
And because it feels a cash grab. For one, there'd be a song that sounded like What's My Age Again on there. And there's not a single one that reminds me of that other than hearing their voices, you know, but, sing. So everything would have sounded like, What's My Age Again, All the Small Things, Damn It, all the hits basically is what it feels a cash grab for that.
And along that line, if I look at this track list, it's a good mix of everything that's led up to where they're at now. It's got introspective songs about, you got, what do we got? Turpentine, which I really liked, is mostly about Tom's, from what I understand, Tom's drug issues. Obviously we talked about More Than You Know, experimenting, having the double bass in there, which they hadn't really done for the previous songs. And that's what I always like, is they're always going to try something new each time.
Yeah.
And I'd always argue with people who always kind of box Blink-182 into this sort of immature, simple rock band. I'm like, nah, they were, but they've grown. There's a reason they are who they've lasted this long.
Right.
Because they've changed with time without changing so much that you lose your fans. Some people are gonna, they'll move on because they liked early Blink.
Right.
Or then they liked In With a Stake Blink, or they liked self-titled Blink, but then they just never really liked anything else. But I think they have done a good job of evolving without getting too far past who they are. And like they experiment with different instruments, recording techniques, all this stuff, just because, yes, they are not the most technical musicians, and I don't think they would ever say they were.
No.
They would never say that. But again, we're talking about rock music, and rock music is a lot of style and attitude and lyric. It's storytelling and just fun sometimes. And so it's not all going to be, you're not all like jazz musicians playing, technically proficient music.
Right.
That's a lame way of looking at any band. And that's why I always, it's like, especially pop music, people are like, because people say that about Tom's voice. I've heard that growing up all the time. Tom can't sing. Manny, like I'd argue that's not true.
Yeah.
He went, there was some times I heard he doesn't do well live, especially when he was on his drug.
Which nobody's going to do well live on drugs.
He was on pain pills a lot. But I think you got to think about this with rock. Does or any genre, does the voice fit what you're doing, the context?
Right.
It does. It's a pop punk band. Because people say Bob Dylan can't sing. Doesn't really matter.
Look how many records he sold.
He's a singer-songwriter. That's what he's telling a story. So yes, now you know how I got to this point. But yes, it's been a combination of everything they've gone through, and then this is a good album of a little bit nostalgic. I'm not a big nostalgia guy, but anymore, I think we lean too heavily into it as a society. But it fits for this. So there's a combination. They got like Turn This Off and one title I'm not going to say. It's always funny because being Blink fans, not wanting to get into some of the more dirtier stuff, but where they get those real short, like minute long, real just filthy song. You get one of those, you get an anthem, you get Blink Wave, which is sort of their experimental, sort of like a new wave style song.
Which I really like that. I thought it was a good.
Yep.
I thought they pulled it off.
And that fit perfectly in with the self-titled stuff. I remember that was the first time they started getting it, like Always. Always is my favorite Blink song.
Yep.
And that it's sort of that experiment. They got into really experimenting with like 80s sounding stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So then they released 2 extra songs after they released the album. That was Cut Me Off, which I really like. And then the other one was See You. Was that the other new one? I think it was called.
I believe so. Yep.
Yeah. And but yeah, when we talked about when we discussed talking about this, I started just listening to the album pretty regularly, more than I usually listen to any album. To be honest, I just I want to get to know this album more, and I just discovered I liked it initially, and I'm just like, man, I really kind of like this album. I don't know what people had an issue with critically. I mean, when I say that, again, 7s are not bad.
No.
And for a band coming back after years, it's hard to really complain too much about getting 7s. But, so yeah, that's kind of my overall thoughts on the album. I like it a lot. I don't love every song, but then again, I don't love every song for any album, really.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so for me, since I've been listening to it, I really haven't been having a desire to listen to their older stuff. Not that I don't like that stuff, but it's just that, I think that there's just so much to kind of intake and digest on this album, just because there's so many different techniques and stuff that I felt like they tried.
Yeah.
I know one of the reviews I read, they gave them like a 5.3. Basically, they were slamming them on having sophomoric sounding lyrics, followed by then deep lyrics. And
that's what they do.
They're wanting to slam them on that. I was like, for one, I don't think that person understands how people, process trauma and stuff in their life. Because to me, when I read stuff like that, it's like being with combat veterans in the military. We'll talk about some deep, messed up stuff, and then follow it up with, a sophomoric, dirty joke, about, something nasty happening to someone.
Yeah.
and that's how I believe that, these guys, they process the trauma and stuff in their life. And, one of them that I thought that was pretty cool on the lyrics was on, what was it? Was it on One More Time? Whenever, I think it's Mark, he says, why does there have to be a plane crash or a disease, basically, in order to realize that I miss you and stuff? Yeah. And it's like, that's them reflecting back, because, they're in their 50s now.
Yeah.
And me, I'm in my late 30s, now I'm 37. And when something like that, I can relate to, because I'm like, when I think about, even because you and I are good friends, and then we have 2 other good friends or whatever. Yeah. We went from hanging out all the time to now we get older. Now it's an event. Yeah.
Life happens.
That has to happen. It seems to pull us all together. So I think that's really relatable on that. And I think a lot of the people, regardless if you're a Blink fan or not, you can appreciate it just from kind of how they're reflecting back on their past, and how they're kind of processing a bunch of this stuff that they've all gone through, I really do. I can't say it enough, but I really like, how the Blink Wave, how they, experiment with the more 80s sounds. I really like how it seems like, Travis was unleashed on the drums, and just kind of seemed like he had free reign to do whatever.
And this was the first one the first of their album that he produced.
Right. And I think he's really gone, he's really done well as a producer because he made the Machine Gun Kelly pop punk album. That was a good album. I believe he helped out with the All Time Low album too as well, which did really well. And then this Blink album, which is, to me, I think looking back on it, it's going to be, people in the naysayers are going to say, okay, yeah, that was one of their best albums ever made. Just because it kind of tied everything in together into one nice package, and I cannot wait to see it live.
So here we are. We've kind of covered generally the album. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad. I'm happy they came back together and released a new album. I'm hoping that means they'll release more. So we'll see.
Yeah.
And I don't know where that leaves, like side project, Angel and Airwaves and stuff like that, if they're going to keep going or what. But
I think it leaves the door even more open for it. You know what I mean? I mean, yeah, they're back together doing a Blink album or whatever, and they're doing 2 tours back to back in a row. But I mean, Travis Barker's been able to produce all these other bands' albums and be a part of these side projects. I don't see why Tom would quit Angels and Airwaves. And Mark on his radio show sounds pretty committed and still pretty excited about this Simple Creatures side project, which I'm guilty. I've heard him talk all about it. I'm always like, oh yeah, I need to add that to my Apple Music playlist and stuff. And I haven't done it yet.
There's just so much content these days. TV shows, movies. The idea that we can keep up with everything is just insane. But
I'm only one human.
So much. You only have one life.
There's only so many Takis spicy chips that you can eat, in your lifetime.
So yeah, that's we kind of cover it. We like it. Do you got any other things you want to cover? Takis are good. They're a little spicy.
But an enjoyable type of spice, it's kind of like a deep tissue massage for your tongue.
It hurts good. It hurts so good.
Hurts so good, yeah.
But so we are going to, we will return to this topic when we go see them next year.
Yeah.
They're going to, like we looked at it before this, Pierce the Veil is going to be opening for them in St. Louis.
Super excited about.
So, yeah.
They got a new album too.
So it'll be interesting, and we will cover that with you. We'll talk about it after the fact. But we'll do a video about how the concert went, how they sounded, what they did, what they played.
The highs, the lows.
Yeah,
our expectations.
Yeah, all time lows.
Way high.
Yeah. So yeah, as always, I almost did your part. Your line.
I know. As always, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Phil.
We're out.
Bye.